streaming link for Committee Day of the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission this December meeting at the Tennessee Aquarium in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've asked Commissioner Stan Butt to lead us in the invocation and the pledge.
Father in heaven, we are so thankful for this day, for the opportunity that we have to come together as a commission to consider all those things that affect the management of our wildlife and fisheries in this state. Father, we pray for wisdom and decisions. Father, we look forward to a good meeting. Father, we would ask thy blessings on travel of all those who have assembled here, our visitors, as well as all the commission members. And Father, we're truly thankful for the blessings that we have of Christ as our Savior, and that we would constantly remember his sacrifice that was made on our behalf. All this we ask in his most holy name, and amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thanks again for everybody being here. I don't know if everybody knows this, but I live here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, so welcome to my hometown. And you're actually in one of the great assets that the state of Tennessee has, which is the Tennessee Aquarium, which if you get a chance, please go see it and look around. It's a great aquarium, probably the best one in the nation in terms of fresh water. So just please enjoy that. And also the city of Chattanooga, if you get some time, walk around. We've got some great things to see, Tennessee River, all that. So please enjoy it. I'd also like to recognize some visitors today. We have Fred Walker with the Flintlock Group. We have a number of people with the OHV issue. We have Clarence and Lawrence Dyes with TFWC. Malin Hostetler is going to speak on drones, and we have Brett Rayburn, who's here to speak on drones as well. So thank you all very much for being here, and having said that, would you please call the roll, Miss Mary?
Monty Ballou, Brad Box, Stan Butt, here. Greg Davenport, here. Steve Jones, here. Ford Little, here. John McCarty, here. Rosemary McElhenney, here. Rhonda Moody, here. Chip Saltzman, here. Haynes Torbett, here. Steve Johnson, here. Chris Devaney. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Director Jason Maxdon, do you have a report?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also, just want to say thank you to the Tennessee Aquarium as well. A lot of folks probably don't know, but we actually partner with the Tennessee Aquarium. They're a great partner of the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. We work on several projects with them. So very thankful that they allowed us to use this facility today. Well, before we begin, I want to recognize someone that's very special to the agency and very special to me personally. This will be the last commission meeting for Administrative Assistant Miss Mary Allen over here. She's going to be retiring. January 5th is going to be her last day. Mary has served the agency for 31 years, rising from division assistant to the director's office. She began her career as a clerk in the licensing division, and she's moved to various secretarial positions in Region 2. She worked in the budget division, the wildlife and forestry division, the law enforcement division, and she has worked as executive secretary in the director's office under staff operations prior to staying home with her children for a period of 8 years. In 2010, she returned to the agency and then back to the director's office in 2018 under field operations. She's been with me since my time as deputy director and has been a steady hand, keeping us organized and on track, and most of you know how she does that. She also supports this commission directly. She coordinates schedules, records, and ensuring that these meetings run smoothly for us. On a personal note, she's one of the kindest people that I've ever worked with. She's a true friend to me and many in the agency. I always say that she has a very sweet disposition. In fact, Betsy, where are you? Betsy likes to tease her about this, but all of you that know Miss Mary know how sweet she is. Everybody in the agency loves to come by and see her. We're grateful for all that she's done. Mary, we're going to miss you deeply, but we're excited for your next chapter. She has a new grandbaby at home, so she's been spending a lot of time with this new grandbaby there. So please join me in congratulating Mary. Let's give her a round of applause, please. We're going to have a retirement party, and you all should have a little thing in your inbox for when that's going to be in December. Also pleased to welcome Miss Juliana Adzori. So to Mary's left is going to be our new executive administrative assistant for the agency. Juliana has served 2 members of our executive team and started in the communications division. Emily always says that we stole her from the new public relations division. She helped manage major publications. She's caught costly distribution errors, and she's adapted through multiple reorganizations within those divisions. She then moved to the legal division, where she's been working with Tori, which is a little upset that she's moving along here. She's handled records requests and contracts with precision over there, helping Daniel on these contracts. She also is pursuing a master's in legal studies with a focus on government. Her experience and professionalism made her the perfect choice for this. So please help me in congratulating Juliana for this position. Well, Commissioners, I'm happy to report, and if y'all tee up some of the slides there, that we've had a strong start to the fall hunting seasons across the state. There's been many youth deer hunts, as you see on the slides here, especially successful ones, and we've seen a great opening for both deer and duck season so far. Our R3 efforts continue to shine, with many youth and new hunters participating in mentored hunts and special events. We're proud of the work that's being done there. That one that you see on the left, that's former Commissioner Wally Childress. As many of you have been to his cafe there in Bogota. There were 75 youth that participated in what he's calling now his annual youth raccoon hunt. They killed 30 raccoons. I think some of you will be excited and proud of that, but they had a big crew there. Our good friend Tom Beasley has been holding several hunts on his property in Smith County. A lot of our folks have been assisting with that. There was 2 veterans that killed really nice deer on Tom's property. We're very thankful for that relationship with Tom. Many of our officers and staff have helped with different events all across the state with youth and veterans. It's been a really successful season so far. We're very proud of all the work that's been done. On the right, the actual left and right, that's Becoming an Outdoors Woman. And you're seeing that they're going through learning how to skin and process a deer there on the right. So great group of ladies there. I think they had a big time. There was a lot of fun to be had while they were there at Buffalo Ridge with that. So thanks to all the staff that have helped with these events. Congratulations to all the hunters across the state that have been successful so far. And we're looking forward to more folks being successful over the holiday season. Today, you're going to hear from several of our outstanding staff. First, we're going to hear from Colonel Grandstaff. He's going to present you a preview of our proposed drone recovery regulations today. And this is following public interest and legislative action that we saw from the legislature. Jason Henegar is then going to come up, our Chief of Fisheries, and he's going to present the 2026 fishing regulations, which is going to be part of our annual effort to manage fish populations for anglers statewide. We're also going to hear updates on 2 major wildlife issues. One is going to be black bear management. You all are well aware of what's going on in Gatlinburg and Sevierville area. You're going to see a presentation on that and different issues today. And then the second presentation is going to be on chronic wasting disease. Our team is engaged at the national and really even the international level on both of these topics, and we remain committed to science-based management. Now, these presentations are going to help inform you for tomorrow's regulatory decisions that you're going to have, especially when we talk about baiting for deer. As this is our December meeting, I want to wish each of you a Merry Christmas. This season is special, not just for deer and duck season, but for the time that we get to spend with our families and friends. I also want to personally thank each one of you. Thank you for your dedication, your time, your thoughtful leadership. I know many of you have studied these subjects very hard that we're going to take up tomorrow. So thank you for all the hard work and time that you put in on that. Also throughout the year with your commitment. Your commitment to Tennessee's fish and wildlife resources and the people we serve makes a real difference. Chairman, I'm going to turn it back over to you, sir.
Thank you, Director. And again, Mary, thank you so much for your service to the agency. And Julie, we look forward to working with you here in the future. So thank you all very much. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize former Commissioner Bill Cox, who's from Collierville, Tennessee. Bill, thank you for being here today. Before we get started, Commissioners, does anyone have any announcements or points of privilege? Okay. Well, I'll turn the proceedings over to the chair of the boating. Actually, it's going to be the vice chair of the Boating and Law Enforcement Committee, Commissioner Ford Little.
Thank you, Chairman. At this time, I'd like to recognize Colonel Dale Grandstaff, who's going to address or discuss drone deer recovery rule that the commission will consider or hear in January.
Thank you, Commissioner Little. Before I get started, I'd like to say good luck to all those that got drawn for President's Island tomorrow. I know they're over there today scouting it out, so it's a great hunt, and I think they'll have some success tomorrow. Some great deer down there. This is a rule preview for drones for deer recovery. There's no vote on this at this meeting. It will be voted on at the January meeting in Dyersburg. So I'll get right into it. So a little background. The General Assembly this past spring passed legislation that authorized the utilization of drones solely for the purpose of locating and recovering a wounded deer. This effective date is August 1st, 2026. Currently, the use of a drone for recovery is prohibited during the 25-26 hunting season. And we knew as an agency, we'd heard a lot from a lot of people. We started this process early in 2024 before this legislation came about. So we created a team of staff across the state, and they met several times. They met in person in Crossville at one meeting, and we invited some folks that actually operate drones and wanted to get their input to see what they thought about this using drones and how we could do it in a manner that wasn't detrimental to the deer or to the public as far as landowners. A couple of those are with us today, Malin Hostetler there and Brett Rayburn. Thank y'all for helping us with this. It made it a little bit easier to have y'all's insight and input. And they did some demonstrations for us, brought their drones in, brought video of what they had done, the recovery efforts in other states where they could do it, some across the line in Kentucky. So it was really helpful to have that information from them, firsthand knowledge to help us with this. What we have proposed drones to be used for if a deer is reasonably believed to be mortally wounded or dead. If the deer cannot be located through traditional tracking means, what we mean is if they shoot a deer, we don't want them to just automatically get on the phone and call a drone operator. We want them to get down, trail that deer, see if they can find it first, do some traditional tracking methods to try to find it. And we know that there will be people that will track and won't be able to find it and can use a drone for this purpose. We're proposing drones use 30 minutes after sunset to midnight. The pilot and hunter are not in possession of a hunting weapon. We are going to make sure that any personal handgun carry permits, those are going to be not in the picture as far as this. They won't just be able to have the hunting weapon. They can carry a pistol on them if that's what they choose to do, just not a hunting weapon. The pilot must have current remote pilot certificate issued by FAA. Only used over private property with permission of the landowners. So what we were looking at here is the hunter shoots a deer. The drone operator can only operate over the property the hunter has permission to hunt on. Now, we know that deer travel, and if they're wounded, they may go across property lines. We suggest before the drone operator gets there that hunter reach out to the neighbors and say, hey, I'm bringing a drone in. If it's across the property line, do you mind if we look over there? Go ahead and make those contacts before the drone operator gets there. Drone requirements and limitations, they need to be registered with the FAA. They must have thermal imaging and a light source to verify the status of the deer. So we're saying 30 minutes after sunset, this is going to be a dark nighttime situation to look for these. Thermal imaging, I've had thermal imaging capability with my work, with my job since 2003. So I know what thermal imaging is capable of doing, what it can see. These drones will be able to go out, find a heat source. The later in the night it gets, the colder the surrounding trees and rocks and plants get, the hotter the deer looks if it's laying there. So the later in the night, the cool down makes the deer stick out even more. They're going to have to fly over, find that heat source. If they think it's the deer, they will drop down, have to get a little closer to it. Then they'll be able to pop on their light, verify that is the deer, verify if it's dead, mortally wounded, or if it's okay, it may have a graze across the neck or in the brisket, and they can see that, and they can tell the hunter, hey, this deer's going to make it. Cannot be used to make animal calls or noises or to scare or lure a deer. You can't take that drone and make the deer move somewhere or lure it somewhere. It has no weapon or netting system on board. Drones may not be used to hunt, harass, chase, drive, flush, attract, pursue, worry, or follow after deer or other wildlife while undertaking a recovery. That is the definition of hunting. Pilot responsibilities, compliance with all matters related to legal property ownership and access. Compliance with federal and state law regulations or guidelines related to drone flight. Pilot registration. So what we would like to happen is all of the pilots that are going to be doing this for a fee, meaning they are going to be charging the public for their services. We would like for them to register with the agency through a ReadyOp app. Very easy, very simple, one-time registration, no fee. We'll want their contact information, the remote pilot certificate number, a region of the state where they're going to operate, and then a few other items, but those are the main things. In that region of state of operation, what we would like to do, if they want it, is to put their names on our website so that when someone does shoot a deer and they need to look up a recovery service, they can go to our website and find somebody in the region of the state where they're at. Pilot reporting, again, ReadyOp. We always, as an agency, need more data. We need this information to see how successful this is going to be, what we need to tweak, what we need to work on. So again, before the recovery attempt is started, we want them to go onto the ReadyOp form, fill in a little bit of information, get their remote pilot certificate number, get a drone registration number, because some of these folks have multiple drones that they use. We want the hunter name and or the TWID number. The TWID number is preferred. It's very easy for us to plug that in and know who the hunter is. The hunter name is okay, but it's a little more difficult sometimes for us to find that person if they're using a middle name, and in the system, they're in our system as by the first name. So it's a little easier with the ID number, and a recovery address, so we know where the recovery is happening. After the recovery attempt, we would like for them to give us information on what happened. Was the deer located? Yes or no? Was the deer dead or alive? Yes or no? And the length of a recovery attempt. How long did it take you? I think most of them allow, and y'all can elaborate on this in a minute, but most of them allow about 2 hours of time that they can spend or want to spend on an individual deer that they're looking for. Drones for deer recovery. So if the location is provided if the deer is dead or mortally wounded. So if they find it, this is a zoomed in. There was a thermal picture of this deer, and then they zoomed in and hit the light on it, and they can see the deer. There's a wound on the deer. If the deer is mortally wounded or dead, they give the location and tell the hunter where it's at. If the deer is not dead or mortally wounded, the recovery session ends. So there's no more thermaling. There's no more lights going to check other deer. The session ends. In our draft rule, we indicated that the coordinates would be given the following day if the deer was still alive. We understand that when someone hires a drone operator to come to their property and look for a deer, the hunter is going to be looking over their shoulder at the screen. They're going to see where this deer is at. They're going to know that deer fell by the pond in the back right corner of the property. So that's not needed. We don't need that information. They're going to know where that deer is at as soon as the drone operator sees it. So here's a little twist to it. We talked with staff about this. We drone recovery of elk on public land with permission of the wildlife manager. A drone may be authorized for recovery of elk during elk quota hunts. So in the state, in our elk zone, we have 19 tags. I believe that's correct. So 19 tags, and every year there are a couple of folks that will shoot an elk, track it a little bit, maybe not find it, and then they go back to hunting and maybe get an elk a little later. And days later, a week later, the public or some of our folks that work in the area will find that elk that was wounded and shot. So what we feel like, this year we had 2 elk that were shot like that, similar to that. I talked to the folks at North Cumberland. I said, if they had a drone, would they have found those elk where y'all found them? And they said, absolutely, they would have found them. So that would have possibly saved 2 bull elk in that population had we used a drone to find those elk the day they shot them. So I think this is a good start to try to find those elk that are wounded and attempt to find them before they go after another one. The final rule hearing, January commission meeting, January 8th to the 9th in Dyersburg. That's where you'll vote on this. We are currently in an open period with public comments. November 10th is when it started, goes to December 26th. We encourage everyone to make a public comment. Please share your thoughts. And if you have any other comments, come to the meeting, but make sure you put drones for deer recovery in the title of it, because we have other rules being proposed. And we encourage everybody to let us know what they think, and we'll consider those thoughts for it. Any questions, comments?
Thank you, Colonel.
Commissioner Davenport.
Thank you, Colonel Grandstaff. I just have a question about, the midnight termination point. I mean, if I'm out looking for a deer, I would hate to stop at midnight if I didn't have to. Is there a reason why we wouldn't extend that? Or I understand no drones in daylight. I get that part. But what would be the problem with extending it from midnight to, say, 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. or some time of the day that's always before dusk?
We discussed that quite a bit, and I think to your point is, if I'm a hunter and I shoot one at 6 p.m., early in the season, it's 6 p.m., and I get down and I take my due diligence and I look for that deer for an hour. I don't find it or I jump it. So it's 7 p.m., 7:30 now. If I call a drone operator, they may be an hour out, 2 hours out. So then they're getting there at 9 o'clock, 9:30. So then they're only going to have an hour and a half, 2 hours or so to look for it. To your point, I get that. And I would assume the drone operators would probably agree too that they would like more time. I would say more time would be okay as long as there is a period that we end it well before daylight so that they can't find one, walk in and shoot it at daybreak. So enough time for that animal to move around the property or to other properties once they finish the operation.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Saltzman.
Let me ask you a question on the intent. What do you think the intent of the legislation was on this?
Intent to allow people to find them with a drone?
Yeah.
I mean, just in general.
So I'm sitting at a deer stand. I shoot a deer. It wanders off. I can't find it. This should make it easier to find it, right?
Yes.
I think we made it very complicated and very cumbersome for the hunter to go out and fill all the paperwork before you do it. And then afterwards, fill out a report. Deer hunters, just like duck hunters, everybody else, they love paperwork. Don't get me wrong. We love to fill out forms. It's just our best part of the hunt. And I think the agency has put way too much thought into this and made it where these guys aren't going to do it. Because if I had my own drone and I was on my own place, I'm not going to go file a piece of paper and then go call somebody and wait for 2 hours. I'm going to throw my own drone up there and go find it. And I think as an agency, what I'd like to ask is for the next month, before we talk about this and vote on it, we need to make it easier for hunters to find deers. And I think drones do that. And especially with the technology that we have, Rhonda at her place had these drones with thermal imaging, and we were looking for Coach Fulmer. We sent the drone up in the sky, and 5 minutes later, we had a very nice picture of Coach Fulmer hunting. I mean, the technology is amazing. And we should make it easier on our hunters to find their deers, not give them more paperwork to do. So I would like y'all to discuss that with the agency, because I'm not excited about, okay, killed a deer. What's the first thing I'm going to do? Oh, I need to file out some paperwork. Oh, I don't have service. So what do they do then? Well, I can't do it until I fill out the paperwork, or am I going to get in trouble? Is that a fine? No, they're going to go find the deer because that's their job. And so I'd love for y'all to discuss that, how to make it less cumbersome on the hunter to get this done, not more.
Any other commissioners? Colonel?
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Does anyone who owns a drone have to register it? So would part of that already be taken care of?
So that's the reason I brought our drone experts in today. If you have a drone specific question. Malin, would you mind stepping up and to the microphone? Yes, please.
I want to add, this rule only contemplates those persons operating a drone for deer recovery for a fee. It does not address the private user issues that came up. I just want to make sure that's clear. I don't know if that came out.
Yes, the private landowner would still have to abide by the timeframes, 30 minutes after sunset to midnight, currently the way it's written. But the registration piece would be for the ones that are doing it for a fee.
Well,
Go-
Ellen Hostetler, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm trying to remember what the question was, so if you could repeat the question, maybe, was it a registration? Okay, so it's a federal rule with the FAA. You have to have it registered, just like a car, even supposed to have insurance on it. So the airspace is public right away. So it's just like, the drone is considered a vehicle. And so you have to have the registration, you have to have your Part 107 drone license and insurance, just like you do to operate a vehicle. And that's already covered. So
And that's for public and private?
that is for for commercial use.
Yeah.
Registration is for the private as well. The private, so if you have a drone and you just want to play with it and you're not doing anything for hire, you don't have to get the Part 107 license, but there is a trust test or something like that, what it's called on the FAA website. You're supposed to take it. It's really easy. Nothing to the complicated extent of the pilot's license. So.
Commissioner?
I'm a pilot, and we have in our company, we do commercial stuff on drones too. So there's a commercial license, but if it's a trust certificate, which is, it's a 1 or 2 page test. You get a number, you fill it out. That's if you just want to do it if you want to go to your farm and do some stuff on that, that's what it is. Now, from the numbers I've seen, there's a whole lot of people that don't do that. And so that's where I'd love the agency to discuss this, because there's so many folks that just have their own drone, they use it on their own farm, they fly it on their own. And I want to address that now before we get to the rule about what does that mean? Are we going to fine them? Are we going to make it easier for them to use it? I think we need to have a little bit deeper discussion on that.
Colonel?
Are you asking the question on or just?
Well, I think you
discussion?
said that there might be some other people.
Yeah, if we could go
Yeah.
right now, if you got anything else you want to say or comments, you're good to go ahead, and we'll go ahead and ask those now. Are you good? Yeah, come on. Yeah, come on up.
We're breaking the rules here. I'm kidding.
Well, that might be my bad on that, but so I don't have a whole lot to say. The biggest concern was that I had, it was already brought up, was the nighttime thing, the cutoff at midnight. I understand to an extent about not flying in daytime. Most days, it doesn't work good to do a recovery in the daytime anyways, because the sun comes out. And if you've got any experience with thermal, you know that the sun comes out and heats the rocks and the dirt and everything up, and then you have a deer laying out there, you're probably not going to see it. So it's not that effective in the daytime unless it's a cloudy day. Now, this time of the year, there's a lot of cloudy days. So there is a lot of days we could be helping hunters find their deer before nighttime if we were able to do it in the daytime. But I do understand that it makes it a little more complicated for a hunter to be out there during legal shooting hours, using it in a bad way, and all that so forth. But it's not ideal for us. But if I had to choose one or the other, I would definitely choose nighttime, because the sun doesn't come out at night, so we can always do it efficiently at night. Now, most of us, when we offer our services, we offer to search for 2 hours until we find that deer. So if we get cut off at midnight, We get out there, let's say the hunter shoots a deer an hour before dark. Let's just say 4 o'clock. He shoots a deer. He waits, gives it 30 minutes or an hour, and goes and starts tracking, gets on blood and can't locate it. Can't locate the deer. And he hauls around, doesn't know what he wants to do. Let's say he calls us about 8 or 9 o'clock, and I've got a 1 hour drive to get there, and I get there at 10 or 11. I'm really pushing the limits unless we find the deer quick. And that's just one call. So on a really good, let's say the pressure was up and there was a lot of deer moving and I get 3 calls, I can't really help more than one person out in a situation like that. So it's one of those things where, like was mentioned, one of y'all mentioned to maybe take it to 3 or 4 o'clock to where we can have a little more time to do our job and not be as likely to show up at a scene where we only have an hour left when we're offering our service normally for 2 hours. Another thing that I thought about was on that specific thing was, so early season, the daytime, nighttime, frame is different. So it gets daylight later and gets dark later. It could be maybe more ideal to have that in a way to where it is a certain amount of time, like to where the cutoff time would be a certain amount of time before legal shooting light or something like that. That way it would kind of go along with whatever the time of the year it is as well. Trying to think. I don't think I'm leaving anything out really. I did like the thought that he had on about making it complicated with all the paperwork and getting different information. So I feel like we already will probably lose quite a bit of hunters to dog tracking teams. And when I say that, I'm not against dogs at all. I think dogs are amazing. I've got a lot of friends that track with dogs, and they're very, very effective, especially in the early season compared to a drone. When there's a lot of foliage on the trees, I would probably call a dog before a drone. But so I'm not biased in that type of way. But since they can track in the daytime, they, somewhat have an advantage of us on top of us already there. And if it's not complicated like that for the dogs, we're also it's gonna make it very uneven in that sense. I don't care for it to be fair or evened out. There are 2 different methods. It doesn't have to be the same way. But the more complicated it is, the more the hunters are gonna, maybe not want to go with the drone for that recovery. So,
Chairman Devaney, I have a question or a couple of questions for you.
Can you explain to me your fee?
yeah. So I would say, so the way I do my fee is I have a $200 search fee, and then I have another $200 recovery fee if I find the deer dead or alive. And the reason it's dead or alive, it's expensive, but the equipment is expensive, is the live deer are a lot harder to find than the dead deer that ran a few hundred yards and bedded down and died. That deer that might have been hit in the spine, we might find him, who knows where we might find him, because a lot of times if that deer can get back up and he's just been shocked, by the time we get out there, he's walking totally normal and maybe with a doe. So that's why we have the finder's fee, dead or alive. And the reason we have it a different 2 separate prices is if I come out there and fail to find the deer, it saves you $200. So that's kind of how I explain it. And I know a lot of other pilots are very similar with their pricing, but it could be $300 to come out plus $100 if it's found, or it could be $200 to $300. It varies. But,
I think Commissioner Little had a question.
I have a couple. How many pilots would you estimate there are that you've interacted with in Tennessee, if you were going to give us a ballpark, that are doing this commercially, do you think?
Across the whole state, I don't know. Let me see.
Like if I'm in Putnam County, am I going to be waiting for somebody to come from Nashville or Oak Ridge or something? Or do you think there are men and women that are around Putnam County or
There'd be 3 or
Cumberland
4 in the area probably. Now, there's going to be experienced and new to where it's, it might vary in different, you might end up knowing somebody in a different area that you want to get. But I would think you would have pilots spread out all over the place by time next year, especially.
I guess what I'm trying to appreciate is building in the travel time.
Yes.
If you think you've got somebody in every county or a couple people in every county, that's not as big a deal. But if you're saying, hey, there may be 50 or 60 across the whole state, we clearly need to factor in travel time because they're just not coming from Cookeville to Monterey or from Crossville to Allert or whatever it may be.
Yeah. There's definitely there's maybe some areas where there wouldn't be any in the area, but especially as the first 1 or 2 years go on where this is legalized, I would say you'll have plenty of pilots around. But we obviously want to do as much as we can. So most of us drive all over the place. I'll put it this way. I live in Tennessee in Clark Range, and I still do a lot of recoveries because I live so close to Kentucky that I hop over there. They allow the drone deer recovery. So I hop over there and I'm driving all over the place doing it, and it's still worth it for me.
My other question is, I've got a buddy who will fly a drone around just to see, just because drones are new here 3 or 4 years ago, but describe to us how you do it. I'm just curious. Can you kind of tell us what you do or how it works?
Yeah, it's user-friendly technology. We take off with the drone and we get, with the FAA regulations in just the open airspace, unless you get close to an airport or a prison or something, you get up to 400 feet of ceiling that you can fly up to. And so we get up to, 300 or 400 feet and we fly around and we have our thermal camera on. And once we find a thermal signature, we get down, we might drop down to 250 feet, somewhere in there, 250 or 300 feet, and we have a bright light on the drone. And then it's in sync with that camera. So that light is going to point wherever the camera does. And so that light comes on and we go on the zoom camera and we can see, okay, that's a deer or it's a rock, whatever, might be holding heat. And so that's how we see, when we get up on that, when we find the deer, that's how we see what we're looking at. And it's.
Do you start where the hunter believes he or she killed the deer, or do you start from a nearby parking lot, and then do you go back and forth? I'm just curious.
Okay, yeah. So, and everybody has different techniques, but the way I do it when I get on a scene is I want to get within a few hundred yards of where last blood was, if possible.
Okay.
So most hunters use some kind of hunting app at this point, whether it's OnX or Spartan Forge or something like that, and they mark that last blood most times. So we compare maps and mark it on my drone controller, and then I fly to that point, and then I search around, look around a little bit in the area, and if we don't find the deer real quick, I do a grid search, just like you would in a search and rescue instance. I do a grid search and search back and forth and cover every inch of that ground until we find the deer. So,
Are there any other questions? Colonel?
You good? Thank you. Brett, do you have anything? Are you good? Okay, thank you.
Are you
Thank
good,
you.
Colonel?
I'm good.
All right,
Thank
thank you very much. That was a good presentation. We'll now move on to the Chair of the Wildlife Committee, Greg Davenport. Commissioner.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to call Joe Benedict to the podium.
Is that better? Yes. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for the introduction there. It's great to see you all. I just wanted to introduce our bear team to you today. We've got Dan Gibbs, Janelle, Musser, and they've left David Sexton back at home with the Bears in East Tennessee, but he's our third member of the bear team. They're here to give you, as the director mentioned, a high-level overview of the bear program and how it's evolved over the last number of years. We're extremely proud of their work, what they've done, and I think you'll see today their innovative thinking and how they've pushed the bear program forward. So we're looking forward to seeing their talk today. I think Dan will start, and then Janelle will take it from there. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. On behalf of Janelle, I'd like to thank the commission for allowing us to speak to you today. And so we're going to go ahead and get right into this. So real quickly, I just want to give you a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about bears in general, give a quick harvest update and look at some of the trends related to harvest. And then Janelle will come up and talk about conflict management, some of the recent accomplishments we've made in regard to addressing conflicts. And then I'll get back up and wrap it up with some of the things we want to do moving forward. So just a real quick history. Pre-European settlement, we had bears throughout the entire state of Tennessee. As the old saying goes, we had bears from Memphis to Mountain City. But bears were exploited to the point that we almost lost them in the state, with just a few remnant populations remaining by the late 1960s. And in 1970, bear hunting was closed in Tennessee up through 1973. And this wasn't going on just in Tennessee. This was going on all throughout the Southeast. And so Tennessee, Georgia, and North Carolina got together and we formed the Tri-State Bear Group to kind of look at some of the issues addressing bears. Two main issues was one was poaching, and the second one was the fact that bears just don't reproduce like deer or turkeys or other species that we're typically used to working with. The females don't even breed till they're 3, maybe 4 years old for the first time, and then they only have cubs every other year. So restoration process takes a lot longer with bears. And incidentally, this group still meets today twice a year, so it's still going strong. 1974, bear hunting was reopened in Tennessee, and we've continued to add more hunting opportunity and add more areas to hunting as warranted. And it's hard to get estimates on species like bears, but our best estimate is that we have around 6,000 bears statewide, and that would include the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So here's our bear team real quickly. Myself, Janelle here, she is our support biologist, and she's the lead on our conflict management and resolution program. And then David Sexton recently came onto the team as our urban bear manager, which is the Gatlinburg Sevier County position. And then we've recently just hired 2 part-time folks, Bill Stiver and Haley Carr. And Bill's going to take the lead on the Bear Wise Recognition Program, which Janelle will mention a little bit later. And then Haley will be providing field support. And then lastly, our wildlife officers do a tremendous amount of bear response, conflict response, and we certainly couldn't get it done without their help. So here's a map, just a quick map on where we hunt bears in Tennessee. We're hunting in 37 counties. We have 5 primary hunt zones. And last year, we had a record harvest of 813. But this year, as of just about 5 minutes ago, we're almost to 400. So we've had a huge drop in harvest this year, but that's not an unusual thing. And you can see here on this map that each year we've had record harvest. We've had pretty significant drops afterwards. And that's just normal highs and lows. And with the mass crop that we've had last year, or this past year, it's not unreasonable to see a big drop like that. But what's key is that you got this long-term increase in harvest. And I just mentioned that the 5-year average was 676. If you go back and look at 2014, at that point, the 5-year average was 420. So we've gone from 420 to 660 in a decade. So when you see these kinds of trends with your harvest, you want to kind of pay attention to what's going on with the population, right? That's pretty heavy harvest. And what we see in 3 of our 5 primary hunt zones, we are harvesting at what would be considered a heavy level. And what that means is we have a high female harvest in the population. We have a lot of older age females being harvested. The percent of the population being harvested is above 19%. So we see these things going on that tell us, hey, population growth is not necessarily as high as some people may think, right? They're seeing more bears, but that doesn't mean that the population is necessarily growing exponentially. And it's okay for populations to be stable as well. I mean, that's not a problem. The reason I show you this chart is just to make the point that we have a lot of hunting pressure on our bears in Tennessee. We kill a lot of bears and we hunt a lot of days, and it works very well. Yet we still have a lot of conflicts. Our conflict calls continue to rise. And this is where Janelle is going to come up and kind of talk about that.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, so Dan mentioned that our harvest continues to kind of increase, but also that our calls continue to increase. So in 2024, while we had that record harvest, we also had our highest call volume at over 1,700 calls to the agency. And just to note, that's any call about bears. That could be I saw a bear's in my garbage, a bear's injured on the side of the road. It's any time they call. And so there's lots of contributing factors that play into those calls, but one of those that we don't always talk about is our continuing increasing human population. So you can have not more bears, but you add a lot more people to the system, and one bear can contribute to a lot of those calls in an area. It doesn't mean you always have more bears. And with technology now, it's made that even more so, right? People can see bears on their Ring camera that they never knew were in their yard before. Now they know. And so I just wanted to put this in comparison to another state that has actually fewer bears than Tennessee, spread over a bigger area, and that's Florida, where they receive over 7,000 calls a year sometimes, but they have 23 million people. So when you add a lot more people, you get more calls. And so historically, how did we handle all those calls? Well, people would say, come and get your bear. And we did a lot of times because we had fewer bears, we had fewer people, so we had places we could take these animals. And so this is just kind of a quick story time. This was a bear that was moved out of Gatlinburg in August of 2022. And it was moved about 40 miles. And then short of a year later, it was caught about 60 miles from that release site on the Tennessee-North Carolina border in Cott County. And then exactly 2 years later, I captured that bear within a mile of where it was removed from Gatlinburg. And so this bear kind of has a happy story because when it came back to Gatlinburg, it couldn't get in the dumpsters anymore. But recent research has really shown that this is true. Relocation is pretty ineffective. And about 90% of bears that are moved are dead within 4 months. And those 10% that survive continue to cause the same problems and oftentimes make it back where they came from, like that bear did. And it's also really expensive for agencies between time and equipment used and that kind of stuff. And so just kind of a quick analogy, if you think about you're making your morning breakfast and you spill coffee creamer or syrup on your counter and you forget to clean it up. You come home and there's ants all over your counter. So you squash them all or you somehow scoop them all up and you take them outside and you forget again to clean up the spill. The next morning, what happens? You wake up and there's ants all over your counter again. And that's really what relocation for bears is. So this map is a 19 square mile area from a research project, and each one of those colors is a different bear. So that's 37 bears, and that's just what she managed to capture. So removing the bear really doesn't prevent future conflict, and it doesn't help the person experiencing conflict. And so we really wanted to take a step back and say, well, what are these calls? What is happening? Why are people calling about bears? And how can we help? And when we look at that, we see about 25% of our calls are directly related to garbage, with a lot of those other things happening because of garbage. That's kind of where it starts. That's where the bear gets comfortable. That's where the bear starts to feel good around people. And then these other things start to happen. And what are some other contributing factors? Bears are recolonizing their historical range, not just from East Tennessee, but from Kentucky and Arkansas and Mississippi's populations. And like I mentioned before, with technology, they're more visible than ever. This was a recent story out of East Tennessee. That person never would have known that a bear took their chainsaw if they didn't have that Ring camera. Now they know. And so it became national news. And we found from recent research that people really react better if they get an in-person site visit from someone from the agency. That's how you get them to do something like secure their garbage or put that electric fence around their chicken coop. And we have BearWise, which is the national program that those resources are readily available now for the agency to use and for anyone to direct people to. And we had the opportunity to go out to Montana to the International Human Bear Conflicts Workshop. And we learned we are not alone. The common theme was that agencies have really tried to fix the problem bear. We've tried trapping, we've tried hazing, we've tried depredation permits, increasing harvest, you name it, on the bear side of things. And that's because that's what we have control over as an agency. But it really hasn't moved the needle. It hasn't moved the needle on these calls or really helped the people experiencing conflicts. And we know the cause is attractants. We know the solution is to secure them. And we know it works. So places like Durango in Florida have seen a 60 to 95% reduction in their calls in areas when they put bear-resistant trash cans out. And so the good news is we're on the right track. We've had a lot of recent progress. We've trained all commission staff throughout the agency. And we've been offering a lot of on-site technical assistance, like giving out these retrofit kits and loaning equipment like these electric unwelcome mats, just to give people some time to secure their attractants and show them that this stuff works. We've continued to work with local municipalities, which has led to Gatlinburg revamping their dumpsters, Townsend passing a bear-resistant dumpster ordinance, and Kingsport and Pigeon Forge offering bear-resistant trash cans to their residents. And partnering with state and federal agencies like the educational campaign we did with TDOT, and advising and assisting community groups. We co-led a Bearwise workshop in Gatlinburg with the Smokies Bearwise Task Force, and that was really well received. And we have a lot in the works. We're going to work on a media training to get the correct information out there about bears instead of just all these sensationalized stories. And we've identified conflict specialists from our wildlife officers to go through additional training. And we're going to work on our Bearwise recognition program. We're going to work with the public relations to kind of create our own documentary about bears in Tennessee, like this one out of Durango. And we've revamped the license plate that should be available sometime soon as well.
Thank you, Janelle. So I'm going to kind of wrap this up with a couple of things here. And I want to talk just a moment about what I refer to as conflict accelerants. And that are those things that are, despite all of our efforts with underground work and hunting opportunity, continue to cause the number of conflicts to go up. And these are pretty simple. You have human population growth, which Janelle already mentioned, but I think everyone in this room understands what's happening in Tennessee and the number of people that are moving here. And one projection that I've seen for the next turn of the century, they're talking about 14 million people in our state. And, you know, we need to get ready for that now. All the associated housing expansion that goes along with that and the infrastructure causes conflicts to accelerate the loss of habitat, things like that. Increased tourism. Tourism isn't just increasing in Sevier County, it's increasing all over East Tennessee where we have bears, putting more people close to these animals. The hobby farming increases, bees, goats, chickens, things like that. And then Janelle mentioned recolonization of bears to their former range. And then one thing we haven't mentioned is the deer baiting and the new baiting law that will go into effect next year. This will cause bear harvest to increase, and it will also cause conflict costs to increase because bears will go to these bait sites and consume whatever it is the deer hunters are putting out. And you can anticipate illegal harvest associated with that as well. So the key here is that 5 of these 6 things I just identified are all human-related things. There are things that bears are reacting to that we as people are doing. And all these things are going to most likely accelerate the recolonization as well and move these bears into the former range even faster. So it's a human thing that bears are just responding to what we're offering them. So some of our barriers, we got a lot done. We still have barriers. And one of these is a need for mass public education and a mindset change. Janelle mentioned Montana, and we were able on personal time to do a little bit of riding around, and this is something that you would see pretty regular in Montana, bees with electric fence around them. This is a 5-figure investment here when you're talking about all the equipment, the harvest value of the honey, things like that. And this person decided on their own to put up an insurance policy, an electric fence. No one made them do it. They chose to do it. And it's hard to get people in Tennessee to do this. Even when they know they have bears, it's hard to get them to take that step and do that. It's a mindset change. Local government buy-in is huge. Janelle mentioned bear-resistant trash cans. These bear-resistant trash cans that these trucks in this picture can pick up are a game changer. And I've talked to this commission about this before, and you even gave the agency a $250,000 budget to create a cost share program to help cities get a kickstart, for lack of a better word, on purchasing these cans. And after 2 years, we did not get a single application. And that's with a lot of work that we did trying to get people to apply, and we got no interest whatsoever. but they already have these trucks. They just need the cans. So getting local governments to buy in is huge. Bears are highly visible. Everybody wants their video with a bear. And if you live in East Tennessee, you can't go a day without seeing something on social media about a video that someone's posted. So it just keeps it up front all the time. It's just a constant reminder. And then lastly, we haven't talked much about feeding, and we've talked about feeding before, so I won't belabor it. But, you know, it's not the silver bullet having a feeding law, but it's certainly a critical piece of the puzzle. And feeding bears doesn't just happen in Sevier County.
Well, that's Mama right there. The cubs are so big, it looks like a giant pack of bears.
Now, I show you that for a couple of reasons. One, to show that's in Unicoi County, upper East Tennessee. And this gentleman, you know, he puts this bird seed out and the bears consume it. They don't go just lay in the woods and wait for him to come back out at 4 o'clock and throw it out again. They run around the area terrorizing the neighbors, trying to get food from them, breaking doors on buildings. He's risking his own safety as close as he was. You saw his hand. This kind of stuff is going on all over the state, not just in Sevier County. And it's not just tourists, it's residents that are doing it. So it's an issue that we have to deal with, and there's not much we can do about it. So I want to finish with this little illustration here. And a lot of times people they'll describe systems like a three-legged stool, right? Well, I want to use a bridge as an example. So the bridge is what we're trying to support are human-bear conflicts, and we're trying to keep pressure off bear tolerance and public satisfaction. We want people to be satisfied and have a high tolerance of bears. And traditionally, TWA and most other states have done this, and they've supported this bridge with two pillars, hunting and response. And that works really well when you have a few bears and a few people. And Janelle mentioned that, you know, we used to move bears and it would work fairly well. But when you start adding more people to the system, all the infrastructure, a few more bears, throw some tourism in there, and now you're getting all this pressure on the center of your bridge, and it's just putting more and more pressure on tolerance and public satisfaction. And, you know, we as an agency, because it's our jurisdiction, we may try to address it with some more hunting opportunity, or we may try to address it by doing a better job of responding, but we're putting more effort into the pillars that are already there, right? They're doing their job. They're holding up the ends. It's the center that needs some help. And what that is, that's attractant management. That's the third leg. And what's nice about attractant management, when you do it right, you can have bears in and around people. It's okay for people to have bears walk through their yard. We tell them that all the time. We just don't want them to find trash while they're walking through your yard. So you can have bears close to people, but the key here is what holds up attractant management. It's not just TWRA. It's federal agencies. It's city governments. It's all the people that live in communities. And this is what we've seen happen in Gatlinburg over the last 2 years. It finally all came together after decades of working. The city bought those dumpsters, and bears do not get in dumpsters in Gatlinburg anymore. And it's amazing to go down there and see the change. But Gatlinburg is not the only place we have bear conflicts. They're all over East Tennessee. So we need more areas doing these types of things that they're doing. And I'll finish with this. This is another one of our little successes that we worked with a group to create this poster here. And what we're trying to do, this is geared towards tourists, but it's also geared towards our residents, that we have to make a decision. Do we want to be on the left side of this scenario, or do we want to be on the right side? It's up to us. Both sides have cost, monetary cost and personal sacrifice. But surveys that we've done in this agency 2 times now, we know the general public wants to be on the right side. They want to be over here where we're coexisting with bears. But it's very expensive, and it has a lot of personal cost, and we just have not got to the point yet where people are willing to take that on. And with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you very much, Dan and Janelle. Any questions from the commission? I'd just like to point out to the public that, you know, this agency has been tasked with developing wildlife for the benefit of all Tennesseans. Now we've got a pro-growth state, which is wonderful, but our human bear contact comes at a cost. And you've got to ask, does the agency have the capacity to take care of everything that comes up between human beings and wildlife? And capacity means more funding. So these employees have done a wonderful job working overtime to make sure that they educate the public on this, but this will just continue to get worse. And the agency is often the one that people call to handle all these issues. Chairman, that concludes the business of the Wildlife Committee.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. I need to call Dr. Dan Grove to the podium. Or Joe.
Wait a minute, we're going to take a break.
Okay, you want to take a break?
Yeah,
All right.
we're going to take a break, 10 minutes, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. All right, we're going to start here in 1 minute. Everybody take their seats. We're going to come back to order, and I will pass it back over to Commissioner Greg Davenport.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll call Joe Benedict to the podium for a presentation regarding chronic wasting disease.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually going to introduce our next speaker, Mark McBride, our Assistant Chief of Game Species. I wanted to provide a little bit of context before Mark came up. So first of all, the presentation today has no action, requires no action from the commission. That'll be tomorrow when we hear the baiting rule for a vote. And secondly, on your slides on your iPad, if you guys have those from earlier in this week, the slides that we'll be presenting today are different. We spent some time with the directors the last couple of days. We've simplified the presentation a little bit, so the slides will be a little different, so I apologize for that. Also in your iPad, it indicates that Dr. Grove will be speaking. He had a couple of slides about CWD, the disease. Instead of him presenting, coming up and going down, we're going to have Mark present those, so it'll be a little easier and shorter. Dr. Grove is here, our wildlife veterinarian, for the questions and answers that are likely to come afterwards. Just want to kind of remind the audience who may not know it that Tennessee is one of the last states to allow baiting for white-tailed deer. Virginia and Missouri are the other two that do not have that. And I know it wasn't the commission action, it was our General Assembly. But just wanted to say it's been a great time that we've held out on baiting all these years. Also, one point to clarify, there is no state law that prohibits feeding of wildlife, which would include feeding of deer. So I know there's some questions, I think, during the last commission meeting about that. There's no restriction on feeding wildlife. So the only difference between feeding and baiting, of course, is the presence of a hunter. So just want to put that out there. Mark will also talk about the chronic wasting disease management zone that we have currently, and where feeding, baiting, and carcass movement is restricted. So there's a couple of layers here, some different nuances that previous commissioners and you all have done a good job to kind of simplify regulations for disease management purposes, for deer hunters, and to make things simple for our hunters. So with that introduction, I'll leave the rest of the details to Mark.
All right. Good afternoon, commissioners. So kind of Joe teed me up. This is going to kind of be a high-level presentation with a lot of background information on baiting and its impact to deer and other wildlife. I'll talk briefly about CWD and how baiting might impact that. And then I'll wrap it up talking about the CWD management zone and kind of how that regulatory piece kind of fits into this discussion. And so the point of this is really just to kickstart the conversation today about the baiting rule that we'll hear tomorrow. Just to work through, there's so many details. We figured it would be great to give you guys some background information, start having that discussion today. Also to add some context to why we put some of the pieces that we did in the baiting rule that we showed you back in October. So first thing I want to start with is kind of why most states initially get baiting. And that's this misconception, this idea that, hey, if I'm allowed to bait, I'm going to kill more deer. It's going to be easier to deer hunt. More deer are going to get killed. Harvest is going to go up. And that's what most people think. But when we actually look at the data, there's a slightly different story. Baiting obviously can increase harvest. Like archery harvest is typically a little higher. It'll be a little more effective to hunt with archery gear. Urban deer management programs, sharpshooting programs all use bait. So programs that are really designed to shoot more deer and harvest more deer, you do see that when bait's used. But if we take a step back and look what happens with total harvest across the state once bait hits the ground, we really don't see an overall increase in harvest. In fact, a lot of times we'll see declines. So harvest is generally, and this is what we anticipate in Tennessee, is that harvest is going to stay the same and it may even decline a little bit. So here's some real world examples. This is Mississippi. They had baiting legalized in 2008. And you can see the red line there, their deer population has continued to go up while their deer harvest since bait was put on the ground has actually trended downwards. This is in the inverse of that. In Louisiana, 3 counties had baiting banned when CWD was detected. harvest continued to increase, in fact, to record levels. Why might this be? Some of these are established in science, other are just kind of some theories. But first, we do know that nocturnal visitations to bait sites increase, particularly with mature bucks, which is what a lot of our hunters are after, right? So those target deer are just not coming during legal hunting hours. We see this increase in hunter selectivity where all of these bait sites are usually established with cameras. Hunters are watching everything that's coming in, and they're picking the deer that they want to try and harvest. Along with that, they're patterning the deer, and they're really waiting for the right time. So they're waiting for the right time and the right deer to go in there and try and harvest them. This one's important. More hunters become reliant on bait, and there's definitely this loss of the art of woodsmanship. So I want to share just an anecdotal story. When we were talking to a colleague in another state about this baiting thing, he works in a state where baiting's been legal for some time, and he shared a story about talking to a young hunter where he asked the hunter, hey, are you interested in, you're going to go hunting next weekend? And the young man replied, well, I want to, but I can't because I didn't put corn in my feeder. So take a step back and think about that for a second. That young man couldn't even comprehend the idea of going out and hunting without corn. So hunters get reliant on it, and it becomes just part of how they hunt, which lowers, the knowledge and woodsmanship and tradition that a lot of us have had passed down with going into the woods, reading sign, understanding how deer move through the terrain, which is an important part of understanding and harvesting deer. And then lastly, this is the big one. We've talked about these bottlenecks or constraints on deer harvest a lot. Hunters only have so much freezer space. They're only going to eat so many deer. They're only going to pay to get so many processed. So there's kind of an upper limit to what our deer harvest is going to be with the total amount of hunters that we have. And so through the years, there's also been a lot of research how baiting might have other impacts to deer. And a lot of states have shared their experiences with bait on the ground with us. So we just want to hit some highlights here. First is that deer decrease their primary movement area around bait. This is kind of similar to the phenomenon that we're seeing right now with all the acorns on the ground. If there's a lot of high quality, high caloric value food on the ground, deer don't have to move far, right? They can bed up in a thick area where they're safe, right before dark, walk 60 yards, eat everything they need, and go back to safety. So as they're kind of making these smaller core areas around bait sites, there's some secondary impacts that come from that too, right? So they're going to be interacting more. There's going to be increased disease transmission. Some research has actually shown that there's impacts to the habitat surrounding these feeding sites, where more deer spend more time in this smaller area. They start browsing on preferred plants more, and through time, you actually see a shift in the vegetative composition around bait sites, where desirable plants make up a higher proportion of the plant community than they did prior because of so much downward pressure on those preferred forage plants that were there originally. Similarly, there's a lot more increased competition and conflict between deer. This is especially true if you think about a spin cast feeder. That feeder goes off every 4 or 6 hours, and it's a one-time, all the food is on the ground immediately, and all the deer are coming to get to that resource as fast as possible. So research has shown some younger deer, fawns and yearlings, can actually be pushed out by older, more dominant deer, bucks and does, and keep them from feeding and getting as much nutrition out of that food. And then lastly, you hear this a lot, this idea of baiting wars. Well, everyone starts putting out more food and higher quality food to try and hold the deer so their neighbor can't harvest them. And we've got some great data again from Mississippi to show how this happens. And so this is similar to the last graph from Mississippi that I showed, but this is successful hunters. So since baiting was legalized, you can see the number of successful hunters has decreased rather sharply. But in that same time, there's been an almost exponential increase in the number of feeders on the ground. So these data points are actually from aerial flights where they've counted and estimated the number of feeders on the ground. So I know with this conversation, we hear a lot of hunters say, well, I don't want to feed. I'm not going to feed. And in Mississippi, it was the same way, right? Hunters are like, I have no interest in putting bait out. I don't want to do that. That's not how I'm going to hunt. But as more and more of these feeders go on the ground and start shifting deer away from people's property, it creates this situation where everyone feels like they have to feed, and you slowly see more and more feeders accumulate on the landscape. And so we focused a lot on deer, but of course there's a lot of impacts to other wildlife. All wildlife are going to use these feeders. And kind of as we've established, you're going to artificially concentrate a lot of wildlife around these feeders. And some of the same concerns that we have with deer, we also have with other wildlife, right? So disease transmission in other species is a real thing. Sarcoptic mange is in bears. We don't have it in Tennessee yet, but it's creeping slowly down through West Virginia and Virginia. It's in Arkansas. When you start mixing all these predators and prey in a smaller area, you're going to have increased predation risk. So a good example here is bears. A lot of hunters ask us, will bears prey on fawns? And they do to some extent. It's mostly opportunistically. There's only maybe a 1 to 2 week period where a fawn is susceptible to predation by a bear. So bears aren't really going out and seeking fawns, but if they come across a fawn that's young enough, they may prey on it. Well, now we could be putting a bunch of fawns and a bunch of bears in close proximity. So just the probability of those bears wandering across a fawn is going to be higher. Dan and Janelle did a great job of talking about black bears, the habituation and conflict concerns we have there. We have the same concerns with wild hogs. They do a tremendous amount of habitat damage, and they will readily come to feeders. Aflatoxins, a lot of people throw this term around. Essentially what it is a toxic compound that gets produced by a mold that grows in warm and moist corn or grain. And when these toxins are consumed, they negatively impact the health of many wildlife species. They can even be lethal. And a lot of this is already known in the agriculture world, right? Ag producers across the state mitigate wildlife coming into contact for predation reasons, but also disease reasons with their livestock all the time. They're very aware of this. These are very real things. And so I just wanted to provide kind of some of that context. You know, when you hear the rule preview tomorrow, well, when you hear the actual rule tomorrow, and if you recall the rule preview in October, we did establish some sideboards in our bait rule on the number of feeders, the amount of feed that can be put out. And the intent of that is really at the end of the day to kind of keep this baiting war from happening, allow hunters to hunt over bait, but not allow this escalation, exponential growth of feeders on the ground from occurring. So at the end of the day, we can hopefully minimize some of these negative impacts to the extent possible. So I'm going to switch gears now and just talk very briefly at a high level about CWD, how it functions in the population, and kind of our concerns with baiting around that. So at a basic level, CWD is not what we think of as a normal disease. Our whole lives, we learn about viruses, bacteria, but CWD is caused by a prion, which is just an abnormal protein. It's a misfolded protein. And when it gets into the body doesn't know how to break it down, but certain genes in the body will actually keep replicating that prion. So it accumulates in the brain and causes holes in the brain. That's the basic concept of what's going on. And as it causes holes in the brain, you see this neurodegenerative process take place where the deer just wastes away. Hence the name wasting disease. So there's no treatment, there's no vaccine for CWD. It is 100% fatal. Most of the bodily fluids have it. They'll secrete it in the environment, and it's extremely difficult to destroy. You can see the temperature there. It's got to be over 1800 degrees in order to destroy that prion. How is it transmitted? So there's two main routes. The first is direct transmission. This is just deer-to-deer contact. So things like grooming, breeding, the mother can pass it to the fawn at birth. But also, and this is why CWD is so challenging, indirect transmission is also a major source of infection. So as I mentioned, these prions are being shed through bodily fluids, or if a deer dies that has it, its carcass will leave prions in the environment. Those will then bind to the soil and persist in the environment for decades. We don't have a maximum number now that we're aware of, but they'll persist in the environment, and they can then infect deer directly from the environment. And so why does this matter in this conversation about baiting? Well, bait sites increase both of these transmission routes, right? We know research has shown that contact rates between deer around feeders is higher than it is in, say, a food plot. those deer are going to spend more time there, and they're going to come in direct contact with other deer more. And they're also going to serve as environmental reservoirs for those prions, where deer coming in even years later can then be exposed to those prions and infected with CWD. And at the end of the day, this increase in transmission equals increased CWD prevalence. And so I want to talk a little bit about CWD prevalence, which is just the proportion of the population, the deer population that has CWD. And that's kind of why that's the important number that we track and how it influences what's happening with the deer population. And this is all based from recent research that has come out of Arkansas and Wisconsin that have really kind of validated these theoretical models of how the disease functions in a population and ultimately impacts population. And the takeaway here, commissioners, is that the endpoint of CWD, kind of maximized prevalence, worst case scenario, one, it takes decades to reach. This is a long-term problem. It's very hard to manage when we're not going to see impacts for 20, 30, 40 years. It's also hard to communicate that with hunters and get buy-in when they're not going to see impacts for 20, 30, or 40 years, right? But it's now pretty clear that that endpoint is deer densities under 5 deer per square mile, which is extremely low. You're talking, the average deer density in Tennessee is probably close to 30, depending on where you are. So you're at 1/6 of or below of where we are currently. And so this research in Arkansas actually found there are parts of Arkansas that are there now. So I want to walk through this simple example. Let's pretend, I know these are bucks, but let's pretend these are does. And this is just a population of 100 does. And I'm just going to walk through, this is kind of an average deer population in Tennessee, you know, some of the vital rates that we track and how CWD prevalence is going to play into that. So average population, about 12% of those are going to die every year from natural causes. These are just old age. They might get hit by a car or another disease, hemorrhagic disease, for example. And then our hunters are going to take another 12% or so out. So you're going to have 76, 75% of the population that's left. They're reproducing, they're having fawns, they're replacing those deer that were lost, right? You're not seeing any impacts. I mean, well, there's no CWD yet. Things are great. Population's growing. Let's say we've discovered CWD. It's been around for a few years. We're at a 5% prevalence rate. You add that 5% on top of the 24%. Now 71% of the population is left to reproduce. That's still plenty. They're replacing those animals that are lost. Hunters don't see any impact. Biologists don't see any impact. The population's still stable or growing. You go down the road a few more years, you're at a 10% prevalence rate. You still have 66% of that doe population that's reproducing. You're probably not going to see population impacts here, right? You may start to see a loss of resiliency. So if some big event happens, there's a bad hemorrhagic disease year and the population dips down a little bit, it's going to take a little longer to recover. But there's still enough reproductive segment of that population that through time they can replace those animals that were lost, stay stable, continue growing, probably at a slower rate. Now let's jump ahead and double that to 20%. Now we're in a situation where a hair over 50% of those animals are available to reproduce in any given year. Most models and research is now indicating that once your doe population gets to a somewhere between 20 and 30% prevalence rate of CWD, you're not able to replace those animals that are lost from the disease and other causes, and you're going to start to see population declines. Now, again, this might be 30 years or 40 years from when you detect the disease. So to communicate that and get continued buy-in for 20 or 30 years with what you're trying to do is extremely difficult, right? You know, when you see these numbers, the initial reaction is like, holy cow, the sky is falling, and you know, you want to take action. But 4 or 5 years down the road, everyone's like, well, I don't get what the big deal is. Things are fine. It's like, well, yeah, they're fine now, but in 30 years, we're going to have a problem, you know, and then you just keep rehashing that. And eventually, you know, it's like the boy who cried wolf. So it's an extremely challenging social issue that we have to deal with this disease. That's probably more difficult than the actual technical disease aspects of it, right? And so just at a high level, when we think about CWD management and the actions that the agency and the commission before this commission have taken, it's all kind of been designed to buy us time, right? To increase the time that it takes for us to get to higher CWD prevalences where we start to see those population impacts. And so the main tools that we have and the things that we've done are restrict carcass movement, right? That's reducing transmission. We're not moving the disease around. No baiting or feeding. We're not concentrating deer where they can interact and transmit the deer or transmit the disease faster and cause that prevalence to go faster. And then likewise with reducing deer density through programs like harvest incentives and targeted removal, where a lower deer density is going to lower contact rates and those transmission rates, and ultimately keep that prevalence lower for longer. And one of the important things to know with this is that any action we take is going to be much more effective when we're at a lower prevalence, right? If you get to 10% prevalence rate, you're already kind of up that exponential growth curve, and trying to mitigate it at that point is going to be much more difficult than if it's detected early. So tomorrow, when we have the rule hearing, you will see that we are proposing a continued ban of baiting and feeding in the CWD management zone and in any new county that becomes CWD positive. And so I want to talk a little bit about the CWD management zone and how we ended up with that zone. And there's some important considerations that I think can be fleshed out from that experience that need to be part of the conversation as we talk about baiting bans in the CWD management zone and outside of the CWD management zone. So for those that don't know, CWD was detected in 2018 and we found 187 detections. It was not early detection, right? When we found the disease, it was there, it was established. And so we set up at that time, things are very busy. We set up this regulatory framework where hunters could shoot deer, move them around to other counties that were positive. And then we kind of delineated, well, there's some counties that are close to detections, even though they're not positive. Those are kind of high risk. We probably don't want those deer being moved to counties where we haven't found CWD either. And through time, this patchwork of positive, high risk, and non-detected counties and associated transport regulations got put in place. And if you look at that visual on the right there, that was what we expected hunters to use to understand where and how they could move deer that they had harvested to their processors. As you can imagine, that led to a whole lot of frustration with the public. It led to frustration with staff. It led to frustration with the commission of, wait a second, we got to take a step back. This is getting too complex. All we're hearing from hunters is that they're just throwing their hands up. They're either not going to hunt or they're not going to pay attention because they can't understand it. And so that led in 2023 to the agency and the commission establishing our current CWD management zone. And one of the main drivers of this is recognizing the importance of hunters and stakeholders in this battle against CWD and reducing the regulatory burden on them, keeping them hunting, keeping them trusting the agency that we wanted to maintain their lifestyle and their ability to go hunt. And so this rule is pretty simple. All of those counties in green are included in the CWD management zone. And that rule outlines that no feeding can occur in that zone. There are some exceptions for bird feeders and feed around homes, but it also limits carcass transportation outside of that zone. And then there's some automatic triggers in this rule. When a contiguous county becomes positive, it automatically gets looped into that zone. And then secondarily, if a non-contiguous county has a positive detection, at that point, the agency will bring a recommendation to the commission. We may create a new zone depending on the situation. I think the previous commission felt that flexibility was important to put in there because these situations are so dynamic. Depending on how many positives, where they are, what the situation is, there's not one size fits all answer there, right? And so as we're talking about baiting in that zone, baiting outside of that zone, there's some considerations and kind of regulatory pieces tied to that zone that could be impacted by what the final baiting rule is. And the first is if there's an area outside of the current CWD management zone that's identified where baiting is not legal, feeding would still be allowed. So there'd be a little bit of complexity there, right? Hunters would not be able to bait, but they could have all the feed out they want. Along with that, there's a whole lot of complexity because now there's a misalignment with the CWD management zone and the no baiting zone, if that makes sense. And then likewise, there's misalignment with the deer management units and those hunting regulations in those units. So there's kind of, it's going to create complexity for hunters when they're looking at, okay, well, I'm in this zone, I can hunt and I can feed, but I can't bait. But one county over, which is in the same zone, I can hunt, I can't bait, I can feed. Wait a second. And we're going to get a lot of calls, and it's going to really cause a lot of hunters to take a step back and go, what is going on here? One concern we do have is that if hunters outside of a current CWD zone are going to stop sampling deer out of fear that their baiting privilege will be taken away, right? If they're concerned that they won't be able to bait because a CWD detection will cause immediate suspension of the rule, which we're recommending, that they could be less inclined to submit samples or submit samples, say they harvested a deer in a CWD management county. So we are concerned about that. And then lastly, to kind of sum all this up, the CWD management zone rule is really where we address holistically CWD, we feel like, right? So we've got baiting and feeding and carcass transport all couched in that. And so that seems to really be the appropriate mechanism where if we're going to look at CWD regulations around baiting, that might be the best place to do it for anything outside of the current CWD management zone, if that makes sense. And so I'm going to wrap this up real quick. Obviously, commissioners, this is a very complex issue. And when the agency sat down and spent many hours talking through this rule and the recommendations that we brought you, we really recognize that there's a whole lot of trade-offs with disease management. There's a whole lot of sides to this. And so we really tried to balance all of these pieces, the intent of the General Assembly with the bill, obviously disease management, but our stakeholders, regulatory complexity, and we try to strike that balance where we're protecting the resource, but we're also protecting hunters and their ability, as Commissioner Saltzman said, to not have to fill out a bunch of paperwork and try and decipher regulations, but just pick up their gun and go hunt. That's important to us too. And so I will remind you again, commissioners, there's no action today. This is really just to kickstart the conversation. Have a lot of robust discussion this afternoon and tomorrow at the rule hearing. So with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you, Mark. This is certainly a complex issue. So do we have any questions from any commissioners or comments? Commissioner Saltzman.
And this may be a conversation for Blair. So obviously, I don't think if the commission would have voted, we wouldn't have voted for baiting. But that is the law that has been passed down for the General Assembly. And since we don't have two of our West Tennessee deer hunters here, I'll go ahead and ask the question. The hunters in West Tennessee are going to lose their mind on this. And so I don't know if this is a Blair question or a Jason question. Have we talked to the legislators in West Tennessee about this at all?
We have. And Commissioner, we have, and Leader Lamberth has talked to some of those members as well for us. He was instrumental in bringing this bill forward. And so he's talked to all the members over there. They're aware of this now. They know that we don't want baiting in the CW zone, and the leader definitely supports that.
Okay. What about the legislators in West Tennessee that were big pushes for baiting?
I think it is a mixed bag on those. I think some of them do support it, and some of them would like to see baiting allowed there.
Okay. I just don't want the commission to get out there on something and pass this or adopt the rule, and then the legislature is just going to pass another law. So I think it's important to have those conversations with the legislators, make sure they're comfortable with it. We don't want to get a habit of having a rule and then having the legislature go up and do what they want to do. So I'd like to have those conversations before we vote on this.
Any other commissioners?
Apologies, everyone. I don't know how helpful my addition is at this point. During session, when the bill was making its way through the legislature, there was not a whole lot of debate. Now that can be because they were, gathering information and trying to actually reach conclusions about their position on that. But we did not hear a lot from the West Tennessee legislators during session on this bill, and I think that is somewhat telling. But I 100% agree with you, and we will make sure that we touch base with those legislators.
Thank you, Blair. Commissioner McCarty?
Having read through, can y'all hear me? Having read through those public comments, it definitely looked like a very mixed bag as far as how the agency moves forward with the public reception of the baiting in CWD, or really even baiting at all in the state of Tennessee. I think most of the folks were caught off guard because we are one of the last states to hold out. I would like to see us vote on this in a way that helps prevent the spread of it in any way possible. I don't know how effective we'll actually be able to be in that, but anything that we can do that would help the spread of it, I think, being the commissioner that is here from West Tennessee, I have definitely seen a large impact in the mature buck population from what I've hunted for the last 20 years in Fayette County and seen the population decline. And I do think it does affect some of us. It may not affect the typical meat hunter as much as it does the mature bucks. So I would like us to however we craft this and vote on it tomorrow to help prevent the spread.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? I attended CWD sampling with a lot of agency staff and interviewed about 50 hunters that were dropping their deer off at Flowers there in Nashville. And I kind of got a mixed emotion. Interestingly enough, a lot of the hunters that were pro-baiting were from states that had baiting where they grew up, and I can understand that. I'm against baiting. I think it's bad for wildlife. I think feeding a wildlife congregates them. It's not natural. But as Commissioner Saltzman said, here we are. So I think that a lot of the commissioners have done a lot of research on this matter, and it shows to me that baiting will increase the spread of CWD. And I think we need to be very careful about how we proceed on this, because we are making a 30-year decision with this. It's not going to be 5 years from now that your deer population is what John's describing. It'll be 20 years from now. So it'll be your children and your grandchildren that suffer from an improper decision. So I also believe that this is why we have a Fish and Wildlife Commission established, is so that we've got 13 individuals up here that will make the decision that's best for the wildlife and not necessarily what's always best for hunter convenience. Commissioner, this concludes the business of the Wildlife Committee.
Thank you, Commissioner. At this time, we'll turn over, and thank you. At this time, we'll turn over to the proceedings of the Chair of the Fisheries Committee, the Vice Chair, John McCarty.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to call our Fisheries Chief, Jason Henegar, to the podium to give us a presentation.
Thank you, Vice Chair McCarty. And thank you, Commission, for allowing some time today for me. Thank you, Commission, for allowing some time today for me to bring the proposed changes to the Sport Fishing Proclamation 25-08. So just real quickly, I'd like to review kind of the process for proclamation changes for the Fisheries Division. Historically, we had went through this process in the spring of the year. starting last year with the combination of the hunting and fishing guide, we alternated to the fall. So in July or August, we have an official public comment period that the public can send in their recommendations for regulation changes. We do accept comments throughout the year and try to keep track of those, but that is the official time that they can comment. In September, we take those to our Fisheries Division meeting and present those to staff, get their feedback, and then also gather any regulation changes staff has at that time. So then that brings us to today. We've began presenting the proposed changes in December, and that's just simply to publicize what we would like to change for the year. Then we open up another comment period. That'll run through January 5th this year, and that will be located on our website that the public can send in comments, support, or objections to the proposed regulations. We'll bring the recommended changes back to you in January, and then if approved, those regulations go into effect August 1st of 26. So just a quick overview. So the first regulations we propose to change would have an effect on our delayed harvest areas for trout. If you're not familiar with those delayed harvest areas, those are areas where we stock trout, usually in the fall of the year. There's a delayed, a restriction on harvest for several months, and then that is opened up to harvest usually in the spring of the year. So the two that we want to change this year, the first is on the Piney River in Region 3. And that season runs November 1st through the last day of February. We've seen that this area is not getting a lot of use, and we would like to take the catch and release zone off of this and just open it up to the regular winter stocking and statewide regulations there. You can go and harvest fish during that winter period. So we would be removing the catch and release on that. And then Big Saudi Creek, it runs October 1st through the last day of February. We've run up on problems here of the water temperatures being too warm at that October 1st timeframe. It's usually November before we can actually stock fish in there. So we would just like to make that change and publicize it so that we don't have that confusion each year. The next one is waters with closed seasons. This is dealing with Catoosa Wildlife Management Area. The current regulation has an open season from April 1st through December 31st, except for dates of managed big game and turkey hunts. We would like to propose that all streams and ponds are closed to fishing during the deer hunts and the wild hog control seasons. Otherwise, it's open to fishing. So this is just increasing the accessibility and the fishing days in Catoosa Wildlife Management Area. And we've worked with the Wildlife Division and come up with this regulation. So the next two regulations are proposed changes is part of the Bill Dance Signature Lakes renovations, and they'll be on Woodhaven Lake and Travis McNatt Lake. Both of these are in state parks. The current regulation for Woodhaven is 18-inch to 25-inch protective slot limit, creel limit of 10 bass per day. Only one can be over that 25 inches. Travis McNatt is no creel limit, but only one bass over 16 inches can be harvested per day. What we would like to do, since we're completely renovating these lakes, they've been drawn down, and we will start from scratch here. It's going to take some time to grow those bass to those quality sizes. We would like to move this to a catch and release only until we reach that goal of trophy bass fishing. That allows the state parks to utilize those lakes for fishing, kayaking, and other things, and opens them back up. It just restricts the harvest of bass. And then lastly, if you remember in October, there was a proclamation to change the name of Herb Parsons Lake to Herb Parsons Refuge and Bill Dance Lake at Herb Parsons Refuge. We'll simply make those changes in the proclamation where needed. So at this time, that's all the proposed changes we have. I'll take any questions.
Starting with committee members, any Fisheries Committee members have any questions? Seeing none, any General Commission members? Looks like you got off easy.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. We'll go now to Chip Saltzman, Chairman of the Budget Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to invite Deputy Director Frank Fiss up to come and give an agency financial report. Frank?
Oh, I got mic now? Okay. Let's not turn this off. Okay. All right, we got that up there. Well, thank you. Today I'm going to give a financial report, which I have through September. It was closed in time to have it. All the accounts were closed in time to have this prepared for today. And I'm going to have a budget expansion. So I'll start with the boating fund. We're generally on track here. We're collecting a little more income than we would have predicted, very little, and we're a little ahead on spending. That's nothing to get too concerned about this early in the year. It's just the first quarter of our fiscal year. On the wildlife fund, we're a little bit ahead on the license income, and our expense through at this point in the year is at a similar to the, or actually less than the average for 3 years. Our wetland acquisition fund sits at a balance of $23.8 million. The withdrawals that we've had to date are for operational expenses and one piece of property that was purchased. You'll recall that the law changed last year, allowing us to spend more of this on law enforcement. We have been doing that, but accounting has not caught up to us. When I present this in October, you're going to see that number, that balance drop significantly, and that's our target goal, is to run that to reimburse the wildlife fund as much as possible this year to preserve that fund at the expense of the wetland fund. Of course, we will keep the $6 million balance in there for land purchases as the law requires. Here's as of the close of September, here's where our investments are. You'll see that the market value of all of our accounts is above the investment value, which is a good thing. We've had years where we've been below. So in other words, the bond market has improved some, still not great, but has improved. We're positive on all these now. You can see our SPIF balances. We're earning about 4.2% on SPIF, and the total balances are on the far right there. The wildlife fund is the one that we're watching most closely. That's where most of our operating funds are for the agency. It's sitting at $70 million. That at this point still doesn't include the $5 million because we got that last month and won't be. I'll show that next month. But we still have a significant amount of the Bill Dance Signature Lake money in there too. So that number's a little higher than you would think of as a balance because we're gonna spend it. So anyway, that's where those are at. And next I have a couple of budget expansions I want to share with you.
First of all, Frank, do we have any questions from the Budget Committee on the current financials? Anybody from the full commission? All right, well then hit the fun part, the expansions.
Yes, this is basically one project. We're asking to purchase body armor for all of our officers. This is a project that was discussed during the budget cycle, and it got kind of convoluted. We weren't sure how much money we would need in 1 year to the next, and I forgot to put it in all together. So here we are. We've got to have body armor for our staff. The armor they have expires, so we have to replace it on a rotation. The new armor they've identified it'll be one vest. There'll be a soft armor that can be put in it, and they can take it out and put hard plate armor in it as well. Currently, their plate armor acts as an anchor. They would sink if they were to fall in. The new armor will be neutrally buoyant at least. So the Colonel Grandstaff has looked at what it will take over time. For $308,000 in FY26, this current year, we can get what he'll need to get through this year, and then we'll buy the rest in 27, maybe a little bit in 28, but I just put all that funding in FY27 at this time. And this is a request for an expansion, so we'll need action from the subcommittee.
Do we have any questions from the Budget Committee? Frank, does the body armor include sets for the commission? With a little commissioner on there?
Surely you won't need that.
Well, depends on how we vote on baiting. Anybody, no commissions from the full commission? Commissioner Davenport?
Thank you. Only on Fridays. Where is the money coming from for this expansion? Is that just being added to the budget, or are we cutting something out?
The budget authority would be added to the wildlife fund, and the money itself is already in the wildlife fund in our balance. So we would be getting into our reserve to do this. Now, this would be eligible for the wetland fund reimbursement. And if we have a strategy to spend it down at a rate that we predict we can do, if for some reason we don't spend all of it on what we plan to, I could pull some of it for this as well, but I didn't want to promise that because I've already accounted for it in the other operation of law enforcement.
100% support this for our officers, just getting that out there. I just wanted to kind of see, it sounds like if you'd had in the budget to start with, it'd come out of the wildlife fund or the wetlands fund, either one. And we're just kind of amending that. Okay.
And traditionally it would have come out only out of the wildlife fund, but now we have an opportunity to spend out of the wildlife fund and reimburse from the wetland fund. The wetland fund is not an operating fund, it's a revenue fund.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Saltzman.
Any other questions from the full commission? Great. For the Budget Committee only, do I have a motion to approve and refer budget expansion for tomorrow's vote? So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Mr. Chairman, it's passed. We complete the business of the Budget Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Saltzman. Members, I believe that completes our agenda. Do we have any members of the public that would like to make a comment before we adjourn? There are. I already know that. Yeah. Yeah. Does any members of the public? Yes, sir.
I'm here and got to talk. I'm just here, as everybody knows, for my flintlock season. I'm basically willing to talk and communicate with anybody that's willing to talk with me about it and show them the evidence of what I've talked about for the past 8 to 9 months, the evidence that I've come up with to back me up, and just willing to communicate, here to try to get anybody to communicate with me that I can, and I'm available, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Will OHV comments be tomorrow?
I was told that y'all wanted to make comments tomorrow, but yes, you can make those tomorrow. Yes, sir. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess, do I have, before we leave, any commissioners have anything else to add? Or having said that, do I have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Ayes have it. Committee adjourned.